Salutations, everyone. This is Peter D. Williams.
Good to meet you.
And what's the name of your organisation?
Right to Life.
Right to Life. So I'm briefly going to interview Peter about the pro-life movement, or his views on the issue of abortion. So, Peter, we know abortion is legal, but is it morally murder?
I would say it is morally murder, or it is at least tantamount to that. It's a very emotive phrase, but it's, I think, one that is accurate in describing what's going on. What we're talking about when we talk about abortion is an intervention in the womb against the unborn child. In other words, a child and a human being, a conceived human being, who is being destroyed in some way so that the mother will not have to give birth to that child. That can happen due to chemical means that try to starve the child of nutrients and thereby allow the child to be flushed from the womb, or it can be through surgical means that destroy the body of that child, whether it be through powerful suction techniques or whether it be through the use of actual surgical instruments to tear the child piece by piece. There is no denying that this is the destruction of a child, this is the destruction of a human being. And that is a species of killing, unjust killing. And therefore, yes, I would say that it is murder. It's feticide, it's the same as infanticide, it's the same as any other killing, unjust killing of an innocent human being. So I think the word, yes, murder is a very emotive term, but I think it justly describes the moral reality of what's going on there.
How would you like to see the law changed?
I would like to see abortion prohibited entirely. I'd like to see it abolished. I'd like to see, obviously, there be alternatives for women as much as we possibly can, financial alternatives, make sure that we have the best healthcare possible for women who are in situations of unplanned pregnancy or problematized pregnancy more generally. But ultimately, what cannot be the right answer to any kind of problematized pregnancy, whether it be due to material means or whether due to medical problems, cannot be the destruction of a human being. So that's what must happen. We should abolish abortion itself. We should make sure the law is justly protecting the unborn child, but at the same time have as much help and support there for women who are in problematized or unplanned pregnancies as we possibly can. But that's exactly what the Right to Life movement does. If you talk to charities like Life, they give support to women who are in those situations at the same time as holding up the right of the unborn child as well, which Right to Life, my organisation, campaigns on very directly, as well as on other situations as well.
Men should not speak on this because it's a women's issue. What do you say to that?
Well, I say that the only thing you need to speak on any issue is a brain, in other words, the use of reason and reasoned arguments and evidence. You don't need to be directly affected by a thing in order to have a right opinion on it. I mean, a good example would be North Korea. None of us, neither you or I, are ever going to be, very likely, subject to the depredations of the regime of Kim Jong-un, right? So we're not going to be directly affected by this, but does that mean that we don't have the right to speak out against the human rights abuses on Kim Jong-un on his own people? Well, of course not. The idea that you can only have a position on things that directly affect you is obvious nonsense. What it is trying to do when people say you can't talk about this because you're a man, you can't talk about this because you won't ever be pregnant yourself, what they're trying to do is engage in an ad hominem, that is to say an argument that will shut down debate, use what's known as a thought-terminating cliche, in order to make sure the debate doesn't happen, so that you cannot speak on that issue, only certain people can speak on that issue. It's a dishonest enterprise to engage in that, and it's simply irrational. So no, the only thing you need to do, the only thing you need to have in order to have a legitimate position on abortion is you need to know the situation itself, you need to know all the facets of the debate and have a reasonable and evidence-based opinion on that, and that's exactly what the Right to Life movement does have.
So if abortion was outlawed, wouldn't women just have so-called backstreet abortions and then more of them die through botched operations?
Well, no, actually, when we look at areas where we do have laws that are more strict, places like Northern Ireland, until quite soon Ireland itself, the Republic of Ireland, when you look at those jurisdictions where you do have stricter right to life protections, you actually don't see a higher maternal mortality rate. Maternal mortality rate is the rate that tracks how many women die in obstetric or childbirth scenarios. It doesn't just include women who die in childbirth, it also includes women who die in illegal abortions. And actually there are lower maternal mortality rates in Ireland than there are, for example, in England. And we see this across the board, actually. We see various different places in the world where there are actually lower maternal mortality rates despite there being greater rights to life protections. So it's simply not true that more women die due to this. It's particularly given that we've seen such a great increase in the quality of healthcare maternal health care across the board, across the world. So even during the 1960s, when England was just about to have the Abortion Act imposed in 1968, it obviously was passed in 1967, it came into effect in 1968. Even before then, we saw maternal mortality rates falling, and that just continued to fall at about the same rate after abortion was made legal. So there didn't seem to be a great deal of an effect by making abortion legal in and of itself. So even if there were, let's say that there were, let's say 10 women who died every year due to illegal abortion, would that mean that we would be justified in legalising abortion? Well, clearly not, because by contrast, we also have about 200,000 babies just being destroyed every single year, and those would not happen if we didn't have abortion in this country. And a good example of that, again, in Northern Ireland, they had a study performed by the Both Lives Matter campaign, which has actually been affirmed by the, weirdly enough, the Advertising Standards Agency. The Advertising Standards Agency said, when it was challenged, this report, that it was actually completely right. The report said that there are 100,000 people alive in Northern Ireland today precisely because they had stronger rights to life protections. In other words, these people were not aborted. So it clearly does work. Right to life protections do protect unborn children, they do stop abortions from happening, and that's exactly what they should do. So not only out of sheer justice, but out of sheer pragmatism, we should say, no, abortion is the wrong approach to problematise pregnancy and unplanned pregnancy, and that's why we should abolish it, have proper right to life protections and proper compassionate alternatives and support for women in unplanned pregnancy.
Laurie Penny is a pro-abortion advocate. She says that you pro-lifers hate women. Is that true?
That'd be very weird. I mean, I should tell that to my girlfriend, to my mum, to all the women I do in fact love. I think it's weird to try to impute prejudice or hatred to people simply because you disagree with them. That shows, I think, bigotry and prejudice on the part of Laurie Penny and people like her. So, of course, it's not true.
If a woman has an abortion, is she evil?
Is it what, sorry?
If a woman has an abortion, is she evil?
Not necessarily, no. It all depends on the individual circumstance. There are some women who have engaged in abortions that are quite profoundly callous. There's a woman who is, her name was Natalie Towers. She engaged in an abortion, illegal abortion, at 32 weeks. And she did that by using strong prostaglandin. She's in fact gone to prison because of an illegal abortion. There was another woman called Sarah Catt who had an abortion at 39 weeks because she wasn't quite sure of the fatherhood of her child. Could have been her husband or her lover. Now she engaged again in an abortion at 39 weeks, which is horrific. So there are obviously callous examples, but the vast majority of women who engage in abortions, I'm quite convinced, don't believe that it is the destruction of an unborn child. They don't know that it's the destruction of an unborn child, and they do it because they feel that they have no other choice. So I don't think that it's right or good to judge someone purely because of the nature of the action they've engaged in, because they may not know what is actually happening, but also because they may be feeling driven to it by an abusive boyfriend, by pressure from their parents, by a lack of material circumstances, by all sorts of pressures. What we should be doing is trying to help those women who are in those situations with compassion, support, rather than judgment. So as much as I will judge the action and say the action is wrong and it's unjust, I don't think that it therefore shows that the women who engage in those things themselves are intending the injustice that is there within the action.
So what do you say to this, that the pro-life movement is seeking to impose its own religious views on everyone else?
The right to life position is not a religious position. Whilst it is true that many people who are religious are right to lifers, it's not therefore true that you must be religious in order to be a right to lifer. The reason why Christians, like myself, I'm a very devout Catholic and a practicing Catholic, former atheist, the reason why I believe in the right to life is actually independent of religion. I believe that the unborn child has the right to life because the unborn child is a human being, and all human beings have the right to life. And I would base that on what's called the natural rights theory, which is effectively the foundation of proper human rights. In other words, that all human beings, by virtue of their humanity, have certain rights, including the rights to life. Now that, in and of itself, is not a religious concept. You don't need to be religious to hold to that. So it's not a religious position. The reason why many people who are Christians believe in this is because they are motivated by the compassion that their religion involves. It's exactly the same reason why so many people in the anti-slavery movement back in the 18th and 19th centuries were religious. It's not because anti-slavery is a specifically religious position. It's because they were motivated by the compassion of their religion. William Wilberforce, the great abolitionist, he was motivated by his faith, but the arguments that he used and the basis for his position against chattel slavery was not a religious position. It's the same thing. The same thing is true for the right to life movement.
Can you name any Labour MPs who are on your side?
There are Labour MPs who are on my side. I probably shouldn't out them.
Oh, okay.
There are some, so like, okay, well, one I think example who is very helpful, and I don't think she would mind being discussed, would be someone like Mary Glindon. Rosie Cooper as well. These are Labour MPs who do have positions that are strongly in favour of the right to life. So I think I'm happy to talk about people like that. And obviously former MP Rob Flello was a great support as well. So there are Labour MPs who do support the right to life position.
Is it a left-right issue?
No, it isn't. There are, I think, more tendencies for pro-life on the right than there are on the left. Nonetheless, I don't think that you need to be pro-life. You don't need to be left-wing or right-wing to be pro-life. You can be either or. Both fit in. Whether your concern is for human equality, which is a very left-wing concern, or whether you believe in the intrinsic individual rights of the individual, which is a very right-wing concern. Or, that's obviously very generalistic statements. Obviously, you can be right-wing and can be concerned with equality. Obviously, you can be left-wing concerned with individual rights. But regardless of what ideological position you come from, the best positions from those ideological viewpoints do support the right to life.
So, unfortunately for you, the tide is running against you. You had a big setback in the Republic of Ireland. You're not going to win, are you?
I believe that eventually we will. I think that justice tends to prevail within history, and even when it doesn't, if you believe that this is an injustice and if you believe that justice must be done, then it doesn't really matter whether you're winning or not. It doesn't matter whether the tide is turning in your direction or not. Actually, over time, the tide has been turning in our direction, though. So, for example, when you look at the polling that came out in May 2017 by Comres, what you actually find is that 70% of women alone, want to see a reduction in the upper limits. 59% of those want to see it reduced to as low as 16 weeks. Clearly that's a movement in our direction, not in the opposite direction. The opposite direction actually wants to see abortion on demand for any reason up to birth. That's a position held by only 1% of the entire population, but that's the standard viewpoint of the abortion lobby in this country, with their idea of decriminalisation, taking abortion out of the criminal law, would mean either increasing it to 28 weeks, the upper limit to 28 weeks, or up to birth, depending on how they did it. That is a position, again, whether it be 20 weeks or up to birth, that's a position only held by 1% of the population. They are out of touch, whereas we represent the vast majority of people in this country, male and female, but particularly women as well. So I actually think that the tide is turning in our direction, because I think Ireland was a case of a total abolition of abortion. What people want is actually not total abolition, but what they do want is to see a greater restriction than what we have in Britain. So, in other words, most people are in between Ireland and Britain, so I think we need to move further in the right to life direction, and I think that's exactly what the public consensus would support.
Is there anything else you want to add?
No.
Right. Peter D. Williams, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.